Thank you very much, Mike. Good news, I didn't fall, so that's a bonus. And that's as funny as I'm going to get today. So thank you very much for the introduction, Mike, much appreciated. As Mike mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about our organization, discuss our GRC program, some of our benefits, some of the things we've done well, some of the things we kind of struggled with, to be honest with you. But hey, that's part of the vision, that's part of the growth. We're then going to get into some recommendations for building your own enterprise program, because I think that's important to understand. In my role, I've been fortunate enough to talk to a whole bunch of different companies over the past couple of years, so I can share with you some of the learnings and things that I've heard from them, as well as some of the things that we're bringing to the table as we're kind of going through this. Additionally, beyond that, we'll talk about our road ahead, both for ourselves and for you guys. And I'm going to do my best to leave time for questions because I'm kind of a talker at times, so I tend to carry on and moan on and get into the weeds here a little bit. But just at a high level, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, we are 78 years young. We are the largest healthcare payer in the state of Michigan. We're responsible for roughly 6.1 million lives between Michigan and the rest of the United States. We are an independent licensee of the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association. And we have roughly around 8,100 employees today. We build, design, and implement healthcare plans and solutions. Everything's from traditional plans to PPO, HMO, dental, health, vision, cradle to grave, wellness-based plans, fantastic. So let's talk about a little bit about our program. And right out the gate, you're gonna see something here, a massive gap, and we'll be talking about that, because I think it's important to understand. Back in 2010, our Senior Vice President, Corporate Compliance Officer, Michelle Samuels, asked a question. And that question was, how can we, as Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, implement an enterprise program or process to manage business metrics, issues, policies, procedures, audits, risk? How can we do that? We can't be the only ones asking that question. What's out there in the marketplace? So they started an RFI process to figure out the vendors that are in the space, did a full RFP by bringing all the compliance, oversight, audit, risk, enterprise programs together to be able to say, what are some high-level requirements? What do we need to do? Went through a full vendor scoring. Turns out MetricStream was the vendor that we selected, and we started executing our contracts. Once we got to that point, it was really a process for us where it was, okay, now we've gotten all these areas together and they've said, I need A, B, and C. We've selected a vendor, we've gotten them to the table, we've purchased the modules that we need to fulfill the work that we're trying to do. Now let's move forward. And we started down the process of BRD, doing our business requirements, starting to document those needs, those use cases, and then something happened in our marketplace and in our landscape. The Affordable Care Act. Patient Protection Affordable Care Act, ACA, Obamacare came into play, and a lot of our resources were kind of pulled away and pushed into that process. We didn't stop, even though that was all going on. Kelly Lang, my vice president, started working with those areas that were initially at the table to be able to say, again, what do you need? What functionality? What are some of those common processes? Do you want to monitor business metrics, self-assessments? Issues, policies, procedures, risks, what's important to you? And then working with them to be able to define not only what's important to them, but what's the business value? What's the benefit? It's really like a mini business case for each one of those areas to define it. And the purpose of that was to build out our roadmap, our strategic plan. And we built out a 5-year plan initially across each one of those areas and each one of those modules. Well, that was all going on. And we're implementing the Affordable Care Act as an enterprise. I came onto the company in 2013. And on day one, I sat down with Michelle Samuels and Kelly Lang, and they said, this is what we're trying to do, get us there. And we went through all those business cases, started meeting with all the areas, focused on some initial pilot spaces as well. We raised our hands and said, look, we're implementing the Affordable Care Act right now. It makes a lot of sense that that's really probably our highest risk area. That's something new. We had an idea on what it was going to look like because the Center of Medicare and Medicaid Services governs Medicare Advantage. We knew they were going to be governing the Affordable Care Act. It made sense. Let's start there with our pilot. So from there, we began to define our program objectives and what those look like. We started to align with all of those areas on what we called foundational elements. And really all that is a common language for issues, for risks, making sure that myself in compliance, when I say something is a high-risk issue, it's the same to the folks over in ERM. It's the same to the folks over in information security. And that was a critical piece from a common taxonomy that you can't overlook. So while we were doing that, we said, okay, what are those two modules that make the most sense? And we looked at the ones we initially purchased, and our initial roadmap was compliance management, issue management, policy and document management, risk management, and audit management. So we said, given what we're trying to do with the Affordable Care Act, we looked at the modules and said, what's the most bang for the buck? Beyond just compliance, what's going to get the most value based upon those business cases in that roadmap? And we started with compliance management and issue management. Once implementing those two modules, we were able to implement those in October of 2014. 2015 to us was really about taking those modules out above and beyond and pushing them out to additional business areas. That was important for us because our initial implementation was one compliance area and about 60 end users. And Michelle and Kelly's goal was enterprise GRC. Well, we've got 8,000 employees. It's time to start rolling this bad boy out. So we looked at our prioritized roadmap and said, who's next? What's that next big area for us? And for us, it was model audit rule. So we started working with model audit rule and we said, okay, we've got compliance and issue management in now. We know that kind of meets your needs, but let's do a pilot. And the most important thing to understand, anytime you're rolling out an enterprise-wide solution, anytime you're rolling out a technology, metric stream, GRC, agnostic, doesn't matter, any technology, pick a pilot, control that pilot. So with model audit rule, it was a controlled pilot in 2015. Our initial implementation focused on that department, their applicable end users, and their processes. I got that business area to buy into the tool and the solution. We worked with them to make sure that those end users, all the analysts, the managers, the director, they all knew how to use the system and the tool before we rolled it out to all the finance folks, all the IT folks, because model audit rule is our version of Sarbanes-Oxley. So before we rolled it out to over 100 users, testing 300 plus controls multiple times a year, I wanted to make sure the department knew how to use the tool and that they were comfortable with the tool. So 2015, that was our pilot there. Beyond that, we started working with the Office of National Health Reform. There are significant attestations related to the Affordable Care Act, things like the Qualified Health Plan attestations. We worked with them to be able to implement those controls and those processes in the tool and in the system because we could do attestations through compliance management. So we were coordinating the evidence, the support, the people, everything, training them, getting them on board. And that 60-ish, 70-ish users, initially in October of 2014, by the end of 2015 was over 500. We started to see growth. People started grabbing on to certain pieces of functionality. And anytime you roll into a technology like this, you're always going to hit a situation or a speed bump where it could be something along the lines of, it's a new tool, it's scary. I've been doing this a long time, it's scary. It's scary. It's scary. I'm gonna say it one more time, it's scary. I'm bad at jokes right now. Anyway, this type of application really drives transparency, helps drive some of that automation, and those areas were really grabbing onto the reporting, they were grabbing onto the workflow. You could see very quickly where you were within your process there. So it was important for them to be able to grab onto something because it's different than your spreadsheets, it's different than your SharePoint sites, it's different than your shared drives, and all your evidence is right there. It's important. The last bullet on there is executive surveys. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. We haven't been flawless since 2014. We've had some speed bumps, and that was one of them. As the program manager responsible, I let a little bit too much go. And I'll tell you, it didn't go well. So we left a lot of sour taste into those executives who were using the tool to do some surveys for an annual Office of General Auditor Corporate Compliance Risk Assessment Survey. Didn't go very well. It didn't go very well because I let a little bit too much of the rein go. Somebody else kind of ran with it. There were some hiccups. The tool didn't do exactly what we thought it was going to do. It didn't go well, and it left a lot of sour taste in some of these executives' mouths because that was their first experience with Metric Stream. I felt like I was back at square one. And it's my fault. It's not the other manager's fault that was running his process, not the other team's fault that was running their process. It's my fault. I'm the program manager. I own it. So when you run into those issues and you run into those things, we learn something pretty hard and pretty fast. It's not about the vendor. It's not about the third-party support. It's not about your team. It's not about that end business area user. It's you. There's always something you can build in your process to catch those things, and we missed. We spent about 8 months working with those various areas to get everybody comfortable again, to win back up the support of those people. The nice thing that we ran into is those people that were on the roadmap that were like, please give me this functionality. Please, I need it. It's gonna save me so much time. They were like, look, it's a hiccup. We just don't want to use that piece of the app. We already know what's there. And so it was real quick for us to get there. But there were a lot of conversations, a lot of meetings, and we had to get people comfortable with the tool again. We had to. So it's kind of like going back to square zero there, but hey, we rebounded. 2016, again, for us, was about module implementations. If you haven't noticed, there's kind of a theme here. Readiness, implementation, readiness, implementation. And for us in 2016, it was really about, we implemented 4 modules last year. We implemented audit management, risk management, regulatory alerts, and policy and document management. We were supposed to be implemented in May, June for all those things, but we decided to throw a platform upgrade on top of it, right? So we said, forget about it, we're gonna do a platform upgrade too with it all at once. We're gonna get us up to the latest version of Metric Stream. Why? Because there were a whole bunch of end user enhancements. Because I really cared about at this point, I've got over 750 users on the tool. I care about what they think about the tool. I care about their end user experience. And as a program manager, I'm constantly surveying those people to figure out what else I can be doing, my team can be doing to support their needs, to support everything that they're trying to accomplish. It's critical, it's important. Know what your end users say, don't be scared of it. So we completed those end user upgrades. We did all 4 of those modules and a platform upgrade. We completed and rolled into production in November. Should have been earlier in the summer and the spring, but that's okay. We did it the right way. We had a lot of functionality already there. We had large business areas like model audit rule, and we could not mess with that testing at the time we were trying to launch. We've got great business partners in that space that were constantly working with us to be able to do that. Because while we're doing that, we're rolling out to all their end users, right? Those 100+ people we were talking about earlier, we rolled the tool out to them. We trained them. We got them using them. 2016 completely ran all of our audit rule testing right out of Metric Stream. Huge win for us. Making up for the little hiccup in 2015, because that's what I call it. It's a little hiccup, a little bump in the road, right? Everything looks clear. Everything looks clear straight ahead. No cloud, rain, nothing. But you're bound to stumble every once in a while, and we did. And we course corrected, and that's okay. So for 2017, what are we doing now? Well, this year, we've got a whole bunch more pilots. When I talked about pilots, picking large areas and taking one little piece of functionality, rolling the tool out from a pilot perspective, information security, Office of General Counsel, enterprise risk adjustment, a couple of our government program areas as well. And we're implementing case management. That module in itself is not only a significant culture shift for our organization, not like just any kind of normal GRC would be in itself as a culture shift, any kind of significant piece of application is a culture shift. This changes the way we report private incidences as an organization. This changes the way we do fraud and financial investigations. This changes the way that we do cases from a legal matter management perspective. This touches everybody in the company, all 8,100 plus. They're not gonna realize it, but it does. So that when I'm updating my roadmap and I'm working with those new business areas that say, hey, I'm trying to do some policy, life cycle management. I got a whole bunch of policies, I want to manage them now, and I was told you've got this tool. I can say, great, that's fine. You may not have heard of Metric Stream, but you've been in it already. Everybody in the company will have access to the tool at that point. We're launching that later this summer. We have to, and we're going to. But when I think back to when I started in 2013 and I said, hey, here's what my executives want to have happen. They want everybody in the tool to be on the tool. That's the huge step to get us there. That's a significant step. So when we were talking about in 2014 and defining our program objectives, because that's step one to all of it, we did. And our program objectives are scalable and they match that enterprise vision. So when you talk about things like governance right out of the gate, we have executive committees throughout the enterprise. I've got steering committees for all my implementations that have the executives on them of those areas that I'm implementing. And it's not just the areas that I'm implementing, it's the ones where I've already been. And that's important to understand because I want those areas that where I've already been and I've already implemented them, I want them to have a say in where we're going because they're stakeholders, they're partners. This isn't the GRC Mike Cover show. It's the Blue Cross show. So I want them to have ownership and feel like they're part of what we're doing and they're not just left out to the side with their issues. So we've got those committees, we've got organizational structures, we've got data governance structures. Why? Because these tools, doesn't matter what it is, can turn into a SharePoint or a shared drive real quick. We all know that. We want to be able to understand where the information is, how it is, up to date, maintained. That's a critical piece to everything that you're doing from a program perspective. We want to integrate risk management, and we're doing that, and we've done that. The risk identification process, the analysis, all directly done within the tool. The updates, business area ownership, that's significant. So now I can take feedback from the business that says, this risk that we identified last year is still the same, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's changed. Maybe we got to do a little bit more around it. Maybe it's now becoming a compliance monitoring review or an internal audit. Things that matter through that integrated risk approach. Oh yeah, and it's all getting reported up to ERM. That's what we're working on right now. So the ERM folks have direct visibility into those items because it might go, ooh, light bulb. These are all things that we got to care about. And we want to coordinate. Who here has been through an audit, be it internal or external? Show of hands. Oh, audience participation, I love it. So one of the things that we constantly get and the things that we hear are, you always get this knock. Compliance asking for something. 2 months later. Information security. 2 months later. I missed. Internal audit. ERM. All these oversight areas asking for the same universes, the same control support. So we want to share the controls. We want to get those business areas into Metric Stream as quickly as possible so that knock stops. And that knock is no longer a knock. It's more of a, hey, FYI, you know I'm completing this project in your space. I saw you were submitting this monthly control for whatever reconciliation that it could be. I see your universe. I see your support. I see the sign-off. I just got a question about this entry. The touch on the business area user, their experience goes through the roof because you're doing them a favor. You're helping them out. And that's what matters. That transparency, that automation is significant. And we really focus on that business level performance. We can see those metrics that are coming in. From a compliance perspective, it might not be a key metric, but our folks in corporate compliance, the Somerset Blacks, the Barb Stockmans of the world, my peers, when they're using the tool, they can see how those are coming in, and they can figure out, hey, maybe that's something else I got to pay attention to. They can see their results. It helps. That visibility, that transparency is significant. And it's things like this that have helped us to grow over 1,000 end users right now. 2014 to 2015, we had roughly 200 metrics submitted in that first year. A couple years later, I've got over 3,000. Qualified metrics within the application. It's taken off. People are getting it because of stuff like this. They see the value. They're okay with the transparency. It's a significant understanding. So how do we do it? How do we do it from a program perspective? What are the marching orders? Because I can't be everywhere. My peers can't be everywhere. How do we do it? We got a methodology. We got guiding principles. And those guiding principles, although looking at them seem pretty basic at times, every single one of those reigns true. Bottom left, challenge the status quo. That's important to understand. Your end business area users, in some cases, are very mature processes. They've been doing these things for a while now. It's not new to them. It's not some new regulation. It's not some new process. It's just a new tool. And when you go in and you take their requirements, they're like, Mike, I need this to do this. I need the tool to do my work for me. I need it to dance. I need it to shine. I need it to run all my reports and magically take everything off my plate. It doesn't do that. You still have to do the control. And again, really bad joke. Fail on my part. Anyway, so you really get to a point where the tool's not going to do your work for you. You still have to do it. It's still important that you do it. Again, that transparency, which leads us to partnering with the business. Why is that critical? Everything we do is with the business. It's not the GRC program. It's not Mike Cover. It's not Kelly Lang. It's not Michelle Samuels telling you. I mean, in some cases, it's Michelle and Kelly telling you because, yeah. Anyway, and sometimes Mike, okay. But you want to partner with the business, right? You want them to have ownership of the application and the tool. They own their process, they own their controls, they own their data, they own their functionality, but you want to have those guiding principles in place to be able to tell them how to manage their data and their information. So it's not new, right? You want to provide that oversight, but you're partnering with them. You want to leverage that out of the box functionality. I can't tell you how many times I was either working for a customer or implementing with a business partner, and they wanted to configure, customize. Newsflash, people. We're not the first people to ever do, the first area, the first company to say, I want to manage a policy life cycle. I want to manage a key document. I have this metric, this financial metric. We all do it. We're not the first one. The vendor's been around for a long time. Your third-party integrator's been around for a long time, and they're telling you, we're not special here. Try the tool. Figure out if it works for you. With every new area that we implement, I tell them, leverage that solution that's there today. Short of maybe I'll configure a couple reports for you. You gotta go to executive committees, corporate compliance committees, audit committees, the board, whoever. You need those reports. We'll configure those for you. But use the tool in its current state, 6 months. If you still need those 3-4 things that you were like, I need, talk to me then. And if you need it, I'll go to bat for you. I'll take you to the governance committees. We'll fill out all the forms. We'll do that configuration for you because you said you needed it and you've been using the tool. And newsflash, as an administrator, I know when you're using the tool. So I know if you're in there. I know if you're doing those things and you're doing things timely. So leverage that functionality. It's important because it makes upgrading so much easier. It makes the patchwork so much easier. It's very important to understand. And then always, one of my forefronts of if you get 3 things out of this, readiness is always number 1. But readiness and maturity, you want to work with those business areas because sometimes you could run into a situation where you think they're ready to go, you want them to be ready to go, you want to implement with that area, but you're really not ready to go. Maybe their process isn't completely defined yet. The policies and procedures, the process flows, the reports, all of those things haven't been readily defined. Slow down. Do it right the first time. Otherwise, you're impacting their experience and how quickly they'll go to their executive leader and say, hey, we did these things and oh yeah, it didn't work. I need something else. So now we're gonna have duplicate tools that do the exact same thing in the environment, all because you didn't say, hang on a second, let's slow down. And as a program manager, for those of you that are program managers, for those of you that oversee programs, remember that point. It's better to say stop and slow down than fail. Because if a business area goes, the tool's not gonna do it, Mike and his team didn't do it, that's a failure. Sometimes it's that business area. But again, look in the mirror. Ask yourself the question. It's not always the vendor. I know we like to blame the vendors from time to time, and sometimes it is them, sometimes the integrator, sometimes everything else. But as a program manager, you got to take ownership of that. That's important. Focus on the customer. Customer is always, thank you. Audience participation. Customer is always right. Now, you challenge the status quo. You can push back. You should be pushing back. Always push, but know where that line is. Know where that understanding is and know what's going to get you there from point A to point B and how far you're willing to go. Between that line, you going all the way to point B? Or are you going to say, screw it and jump to C? Those are always the best. Be your own champion. If you're not up here and when you're talking about your tool, your process, your program, and if you're not excited, they're not going to be. If you're not bouncing around, if you're not, oh man, this is awesome, and I know sometimes you need a little pick-me-up, but be your own champion. Be supportive. Be out there. Put yourself out there. Know your tool. Know your processes. If they're nimble enough, tools and your processes, things are going to go really well for you. If you make them really rigid, it's really hard to partner with the business. If you say, I must have A, B, C, D, E, it's really hard to partner with the business, and they're going to lose you immediately. Communicate often, frequently, up, down, even level. Your partners with the business aren't just at your level. They're all the way up and all the way down. That little analyst can be the squeakiest wheel to your program. That analyst is the squeakiest wheel to your program because that analyst is the one that's in there every day. I know, I'm looking at one. He's a squeaky wheel. But they can, if you don't have them on your side and if you don't have them working with you and you're doing everything in your power to help them and support them, they're going to tune you out. So you got to be enthusiastic. You got to be your own champion. You got to communicate often and frequently. One-on-ones, take things out of email. Go talk to the person. It's a novel concept these days. Not just text messages, not just emails. Go talk to them. If it's longer than 3 sentences, pick up the phone or go to their office and talk to them. It's something that we're missing more and more. But now I've talked a little bit about my program, some of the things that we've done really well and some of the things that we do. Let's talk to you about yours. Let's talk to you about yours. One of the biggest questions I constantly get is how? How do we do this? How do I build an enterprise program? How do I go from 67 users to 1,000 in 2 years? How do I go from 200 metrics to 3,000 in 2 years? Let's simplify it in the most easiest fashion. Define those program objectives. Talked about it a little bit today already, but I'm going to keep harping on it. You want to focus on reducing risk wherever you can. Risk is a good thing. We should like risk. We shouldn't be scared of it, but we should be able to manage it, understand it, and try to reduce it where we can. Define that ongoing support model. And what do I mean by that? That ongoing support model is how you manage your business area users. Give them every tool in the book before they ask for it. And if you can't, you're not ready to launch. We've got live training, quick reference guides, automated video training, over 70 videos, 1 to 5 minutes in length. We got process-specific training. I don't just take the model audit rule folks and work with the model audit rule team and say, here's our general metric stream training, go. No, you have process-specific training, how they do things and how they're going to be using the tool in the system. The same thing for all the attestations and federal reporting. You want to be able to have that quick reference guide. Yeah, you know what, painful step by step by step by step manual, we're going to keep going this way a little bit. That thing, you got to have it. I'll tell you, 1,000 users, maybe been open 5 times. But you got to have it because there's always that somebody that wants it. Between the automated training, the live training, that quick reference guide, that accomplishes 95% of my user base without a phone call. Without a phone call. That's significant. Configure it. And if you want to talk about it afterwards, just come find me. I'll show you how. Prioritize those projects and keep prioritizing those projects. You heard me talk about back in 2010, 2011, when Kelly Lang was running, she was fully in charge of everything there, and she still is. But when she was running it, that was the first thing she said and she did. She took those business areas, made them do a business case, and prioritized them based upon value and accountability within their spaces. We are constantly updating that. The who's next. And sometimes that area that you think is next, take a look at that readiness and maturity and they're dropping down. But you want to work with them. You don't just disappear. Part of being that GRC program manager is you want to be there with them, day in and day out. You want to help them. So even if they fall down on your list and your prioritization scale, don't just walk away from them. Don't just say, hey, go create policies and procedures. I'll be back in 2 years. No, work with them. Help them out. Help bridge that gap. Give them a resource to help them do that. Show them what other business areas are doing. Bring them in there. Bring them into the fold. Bring them into your executive committees so they can hear how other areas are doing. They can see it. Hook them up with some of those other subject matter experts. Align those common processes. That's huge. If you've already implemented one area for something like attestations, right? You should be able to work with those other business areas that do attestations and get them up quickly. Which leads me back to quick wins in areas of greatest need. You should be able to look at a business area for a process you've already implemented in other areas and tell them, point blank, how long is it going to take? Is it just you and your team? Do you have to bring in the vendor? Do you have to bring in your third-party integrator? How much is it going to cost? Is there a cost? You should be able to tell them that. If it's a completely new thing, say, look, I got to do some analysis, and be honest with them. Some people say under-promise, over-deliver, and whatever you do, don't over-promise and under-deliver. I just say deliver. If you've been around and you've implemented the tool, you should know as a program manager what it's going to take. And if you don't, take some time to know, because that's important. Readiness, readiness, readiness. Always critical in everything that we do. Maintain that sense of urgency, that up, right? If you're not excited, they're not going to be. And you want to be like, how can I get you up as quickly as I can? It's important to run with them. And you want to communicate to their executive area frequently because, again, that squeaky wheel. You want to maintain that. You want to make sure that you're okay from that side of the house. You want to establish and enforce that governance, and that really aligns back to that program objectives, but align with any corporate strategies you can. Let people know what functionality you have. Scream about it. Send out email blasts. Work with your corporate communications folks. Let them know. Let the company know what you have. By doing so, you're going to get more people involved. More people are going to want to be part of that program. And added to that, you're going to be able to say, this is what we're doing, and you're going to limit the risk of the ability of another tool to come in, another process, another GRC area to pop up. Trust through delivery. We talked a little bit about it, but you got to build that trust with your executives, with your peers, with the doers of the team. Trust through delivery. If you're successful and you're enabling them and you're helping them, they'll want to be around you and they'll take whatever you say as gospel. But you screw up once, you got to rebuild that trust. You square right back down to square zero all over again. And you got to work to build that trust. But if you're communicating frequently and often and being honest with where you're at in the process and you understand how long it takes you to do things, you can put caveats on that all day. Hey, if I don't have your undivided attention for the next 45 minutes, you might miss some of this, but that's okay. But if you're paying attention, you're going to get all of this. Put those caveats in there. That's okay. That's all right. And that's significant from that piece. But how do you do it? And it all starts with driving that accountability in order to realize that right, in order to realize your benefits here. That's a significant piece. It's not just you holding yourself accountable, you holding your team accountable, you holding your business partners accountable, because remember, they're with you every step of the way. They are with you every step of the way, and they have to be. And you got to remember throughout this entire thing, we've heard it a million times today. when you look at it, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. It's taken us 7 years almost to get to where we're at. We're rolling now, but it took us a while to get going. It took us a while to take things back to square zero and reset a couple times. That's okay. That's all right. Next point here that I can't stress enough is that ROI and being effective in achieving business results shouldn't be mutually exclusive. I will tell you this in every company I talk to that's like, hey, how did you guys get funding? How did you do that? GRC implementations are strategic implementations. You're not going to drive a significant ROI. You should be focused on the business results and what you're going to get out of that tool. You might have a positive ROI if you're retiring a bunch of applications. That's a thing. Doesn't happen often. Because the second you implement and you go to launch that you go to retire that old app, that business will go, hang on a second, I don't want to give it up yet. You got to hold people accountable to those things, to what they say is part of that business case. You got to hold them accountable to that. And it's important to understand that. And you will never be successful in any of this if you don't have clearly defined scope and roles. Who's doing what, when, and how? If it's not clear, it's not defined, it's not agreed to, you're going to fail. Right out the gate. It's the easiest thing you do. Define that scope, define those roles. Be good to go from that stage of the game forward. Business cases. Focus on the real savings. Real savings. What do I mean by that? Any hard costs, any admin savings? Hard cost admin savings. I'm retiring applications, retiring hardware, terminating contracts and agreements. Maybe I'm saving an FTE. Maybe I'm able to get rid of contractors. Those last two statements are few and far between with these. Soft cost. It's important to understand that cost avoidance. If we don't automate, if we don't implement these things, what are we going to have to do to maintain? How much time am I saving by automating policy management? Where else am I going to be able to deploy my resources because of those things? If I implement something like compliance management, I've got metrics coming in. That's important. How much time is that going to save me? Partner with the business on everything you do. I cannot stress it enough. They are your partner. If you're standing up in a room like this and you're pitching, hey, we got to automate with a GRC solution, and they're not standing next to you, you're doing it wrong. You're going to wind up in a situation where you've implemented a tool, they're not going to buy in, and no one's going to use it. I cannot tell you how many conversations I've had in the last 2 years on that scenario. People calling and saying, how did you get them to use the tool? Well, see, we bought this thing and we implemented it, whatever it is, and they're not using it, and I can't make them use it. It's because you didn't have them there with you. They weren't bought in. The executives weren't bought in. The area wasn't bought in. You just went and did something, and not telling them to use it. It doesn't work. Strains relationships. Have them there with you. Have the right level of leader there with you. And understand all those potential costs before you draft a business case. You should be able to tell those leaders on day one how much it's going to cost. Consider not only the vendor, consider your team's time. Consider if you need a third-party integrator. And have the vendor there. Your third-party integrator there. Budget for it. Don't let them leave. Keep them there. And if you're using a company that has third-party resources in India, budget to have them over. So if you're using MetricStream, plan to budget to have them over. Have them there with you every step of the way. You do that, you're already putting yourself ahead of the game. Those people they'll understand your requirements. They'll understand why the business needs something. And you'll be successful. It's going to help you be successful. I can't stress that enough. That's all we care about. We all want to be successful in our implementations. So we got a mantra. And I'd love to say it's my mantra, but it's not. I'm taking this from one of our senior executives because it fits in everything that we do. Our mantra, and you can remember it, you can say it, use it, do different, do better. Everything that you do, every time that you implement, it doesn't matter what the process is, do different, do better. Challenge that status quo. Align those new areas to the enterprise framework. If I can get all the compliance, audit, oversight areas at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan to align on what a critical issue is, you can too. Provide those end users every single tool that they could possibly want. Give it to them before they even ask for it. I'm going to implement your process. Here's that automated training. Here's a quick reference guide. Here are some slides about it. Oh yeah, I've already scheduled all that training with your end users. They're already set up within the tool. We're ready to go. Give it to them all immediately. The more they have at their fingertips, the better off they're going to be. And make sure that your processes are as nimble as they possibly can be. The more rigid they are, the less likely you are going to be able to bring in those additional areas. Stay engaged, maintain that level of urgency, and engage with your vendors frequently and often. Have them at the table. Don't let them leave. Keep them there. In 2014, my boss put us in a room, no windows. We had my team, we had Metric Stream, we had our third-party integrator team, we had our Ernst & Young team there with us, we had our contractors, we had business area resources. All in a room, no windows, worked great. We got a lot done. We didn't know when it was time to leave. Bad joke. Can't implement without the business, and readiness, readiness, readiness. 3 things right out of the gate to remember. Readiness, readiness, readiness. Partner with the business in every implementation that you do. Do different, do better. So we were talking about that road ahead. It looks clear, there's curves. You're gonna hit a little bump here and there, it's gonna happen, and that's okay. It's how you course correct that matters. I know where I'm going. I'm implementing a whole bunch of pilots this year. I'm implementing a module that is going to change the culture of compliance at my company. I'm excited about it. I'm off the walls happy that we're doing this. And I know what I'm doing next year too. I'm gonna implement more modules in other areas. And we're gonna keep enabling the business, and I'm gonna keep partnering with the business because it's important. Stay engaged. Put your plan together. Challenge yourself, challenge your team. And above all else, try to be different, do better. That's the program, that's what you want to do. Thank you. So, I think I got like 2 minutes for questions. Any questions? Yes, up front. So in terms of kind of our production support team, we've got my team, which is myself, and I've got 2 full-time resources and FTEs, but they're also responsible for implementing other areas as well. Typically about 50% of one of those FTEs' time is really kind of driving those support calls and details, bug fixes, and things of that nature. In the back.
Policies and procedures.
Yep.
If you had to change your policies and procedures, how long it took for you? Did you take any external counsel help?
So just so I can hear it correctly. So for policies and procedures, cradle to grave, how long did it take us to are you saying like make a change to a policy? Or, all right. So it really depends on the business area itself. As we all kind of can understand, you can have a policy and procedure, can be a departmental policy or could be an enterprise-wide policy. They're all gonna have different amounts of approvals that'll be required. Those department policies, we update those pretty regularly, depending upon the area, about every year. The federal regulated policies, I believe they gotta be updated every 3 years. I think that's right, I'm looking at Nick, I'm getting a head nod. Some of those are updated every year on an annual basis, but it really depends on the applicable area. We tend to set up 2 life cycles with each one of those areas. There's like an automatic, hey, auto load, no approval needed, those key documents, things that we want to share with business areas. And then they tend to set up a couple approval workflow, depending upon whatever that department requires. So really they have 2 to 3 life cycles for each one of the areas, but it moves a lot quicker and it's all stored and you can track your comments. It's pretty nifty. Anything else? Oh.
2 questions for you. One is, how did you operationalize change requests for your foundational libraries? And the second is, did you have any specialized training for your executives separate from other training?
That's a great one. So how do we operationalize, tongue-tied, the requirement libraries? So we put ownership within the compliance areas for their owned requirements, And then they work with the business areas on a defined basis as those change. And we also work with on the federal, on the Affordable Care Act side, we really have two major areas that we work with when there's changes and updates that need to be made. And that's our Office of National Health Reform and Federal Public Policy. And then on the state side, we work with our state public policy department. And they tell us, hey, you should really be updating this on an ABC basis. And we get together as a leadership team with them on a monthly basis to do that. And then in terms of executive level training, because when the executives log in, they really care about the reports and getting to their reports. So we've got those videos that they're all linked to, and they're 1 to 5 minutes in length, and it'll get them there. Additionally, we're also like training their admins as well, so how they can pull down those applicable reports.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, we have two questions as well. One, did you migrate from any pre-existing tools before MetricStream? And our second question is, of the 7 years that it took you, what took you the most time? Like, what was the most challenging?
Okay, so first question was, we had disparate solutions throughout the enterprise, but not any kind of formal technology. We had purchased MetricStream back in 2010, and that's where we knew we were going as an enterprise. So we had to migrate from a whole bunch of SharePoint sites, Excel documents, files, things of that nature, SharePoint lists, and we had to migrate those and over from that side of the house. And your second question was, what was the hardest to do? Honestly, for us, it was 2016. Like, there's not like a simple answer to that. For us, it was 2016. We implemented a lot of modules. We also threw on a platform upgrade on top of it. We had a lot of moving pieces. We had a lot of UAT that was involved. We tested that system. I think it was over 6,000 test scripts we executed against the application because I needed to make sure I wasn't impacting my end business area users and things were going to work for them. So we had a lot of testing that was involved, and that was just in itself, I'll say 2016. It wasn't any one module that's more difficult than the other for us, but 2016 was, the good thing is we had a great team. We had great resources from the vendor side. We had a great third-party integrator helping us out. Our team was ramped up. We knew what we needed to do, and the business was with us every step of the way. Time for one more? Are we good? Give me a call. Okay, yeah, perfect. I'll be off on the side here. Any other questions? But thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate your time. Thank you.